And we're live.
Hi, Jeff McKinney.
Jeff McKinney, real talk. This is with no light. This is with low light. This is with medium light. This is with bright ass light, and I can't see.
I thought he was going to say highlights. I don't see any highlights in your hair, Sullivan.
So let me know what you think. Your opinion matters to me. The rest of these guys can suck off.
All right. John, give me another mic check, would you?
Check. 1, 2, 3.
All right, one more.
Test.
All right, let's see. All right. We're going with what we got.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I got equipment falling all over the place here.
No, there's a beer called the Rabbit of Caerbannog.
What?
The Rabbit of Caerbannog.
Is that a Monty Python reference?
That's the rabbit from Monty Python.
Is it?
Big shark.
It can jump so. Look at the bones. Yeah, love that.
What in the heck is going on here? Sorry about this, Agnes.
That's right. Blame it on the new guy.
If you don't hurry up, I'm going to bring out the holy hand grenade.
Yeah, but then you can't count to 3.
3, sir. 3.
Okay, here's me.
You're coming a little hot.
All right, how's that? Okay.
That's too low.
Too low? How about right there?
That's good.
Okay. All right, now I need John, you come back at me.
Hey, Jeff, what are you doing? What are you having to drink tonight? Do you need a cup of sugar?
All right, go again.
Test. 1, 2, 3.
One more.
Test.
Jeff, you give me something.
Hey, what's up?
What the hell is going on?
And here was me thinking I was dealing with a bunch of professionals.
Right? I am.
Where the heck did you get that idea?
I think I found sound fantastic, Jeff. I don't know what's
Okay.
going on your end.
All right. John, give me something.
Oh, hello.
Yeah,
Am I talking?
All right, I think I have that all fixed.
I can't believe Jeff McKinney watches the video from the beginning every week. That's impossible.
Right. Okay.
What's the word? It's Schadenfreude.
Master. All right. I don't know. We hardly ever have hardware problems, but things were a bit jacked up there tonight. But I got it sorted out. I've got our recordings going. All right. Here we go. Any questions before we get started?
Is it too late to back out?
All right.
What's the wind speed of a sparrow?
Yeah. All right. Here we go.
This week's episode is partially sponsored by Wine Still Sold Out. Find out how to save $5 on your order a little later on the show. Check out WTSO.com/WLD.
Hi, guys. I'm LC May with Clyde May's Whiskey, and you're listening to the We Like Drinking podcast, where you never drink alone, and you're drinking Clyde May's Whiskey. You're really enjoying yourself.
At the sound of the tone, the official We Like Drinking time will be 5 o'clock. Commence consumption.
This week week on episode 225 of the We Like Drinking podcast, we'll be discussing craft beer numbers. It's announcement time, and we're joining the Bar Convent with Angus Winchester. So crack open your beers, uncork that wine, and let's get drinking! All right, listeners, 225 times, and it's still an absolute train wreck gong show trying to get this thing going sometimes. So we're proven to be professionals once again this week to our guest, like we like to do. So let me start off by saying cheers, my podcast drinking friends, and welcome to Happy Hour 225 of the only two-time award-winning topical beer and wine education podcast focusing on fun. Are we having fun yet, guys?
Yeah, it was fun to watch you walk out to the front of the car and crank the motor to get it to start.
Right. And then the Keystone Cops came in. So if by now you've already realized that you're listening to just podcast gold here, be sure to get yourself subscribed to the show so you never miss an episode. Visit welikedrinking.com/subscribe to take your first step down this train wreck. All right. We've been drinking for a while. You haven't, but we have. So we're going to get into this and find out who we're drinking with tonight. We've got our usual panel members. We have our wine blogger, Jeff Solomon.
That is me.
We have our beer brewer, John Ruyak.
Present and accounted for.
And I am your host, Jeff Eccles. And our guest this week is the Director of Education at Bar Convent Brooklyn, an industry trade show devoted to the craft cocktail movement, bringing the best of the bar and beverage community together to celebrate and sculpt the future of liquid culture. He is Angus Winchester. Welcome to the show, Angus.
Hey, thank you very much. Damn glad to be here.
So happy to have you here. And for the first time, where are you coming to us from?
I'm actually sitting in Hong Kong at the moment.
Our first time we've had a guest from Hong Kong on the show, so I'm super excited about that. One more pin in the map, the big map of guests that we keep on the wall behind me that you can see. It's not there. So you can find Bar Convent Brooklyn on the socials, on Instagram and Facebook at Bar Convent Brooklyn, and on Twitter at BC Brooklyn. Or check out their website at barconventbrooklyn.com. You can also treat yourself by finding Angus himself on Twitter and Instagram at Angus Winchester. You've got a fun Twitter account, Angus. I'm not going to lie.
Thank you very much. I joined Twitter many, many years ago. Actually, it's to do with South by Southwest. I was used to watch a video blog called Tiki Bar TV. And one of the stars of that said he was going to be at South by Southwest and follow him on Twitter. I've never, ever heard of this, so I joined it. Back in the day when, using old phones, it wasn't nearly as interesting as it was now. But then someone wrote an article about a year later talking about bartenders on Twitter, and I went back and checked it and found I had 500 followers and thought, right, I should probably use this in some way then.
I should probably say hello at least.
Isn't it great? Like sometimes you can just tell, like as a teacher, sometimes I can tell just having a conversation with somebody else that's a teacher that they're good at what they do. And I have not seen Angus's Twitter account, but just in the brief moments that we've had together, I know it's friggin' amazing.
That's very kind. All the good stuff has been suppressed by clever lawyers and court orders and things like that. But, what's left, I hope, is worth a couple of seconds reading anyway.
All right. Well, let's find out what everybody's drinking tonight. John Ruyak, what you got?
Well, I haven't done this in a while, so I thought about having a cocktail. So I thought I'd get a beer that's as strong as a cocktail. So I picked up Deschutes The Abyss 2017 Imperial Stout.
Nice.
Wow.
How about you, Jeff Solomon?
Good stuff.
Does that Abyss come with like a wax top on
Yes,
it too?
yeah, but it's not an irritating wax top. I could peel it off with the pointy end of the bottle opener.
Okay. Well, what I did was, because I'm kind of a lightweight, I took a beer as strong as a cocktail and I cut it in half. I am drinking out of a can, poured into a glass, the Booming Rollers Hoppy Citra IPA from Modern Times. And it is hoppy and citra-y.
Angus, what are you drinking this morning?
Well, I have to say, I was a little bit nervous about coming on. And even though it's 10:30 in the morning, I'd actually just come back from Taipei, where I was talking at a gin and tonic festival. So I was having a little bit of a gin and tonic in my special gin and tonic glass, but unfortunately it's empty.
Yeah.
How long it took us to get the show going tonight. In honor of our guest tonight, I decided to whip up a mixed drink as well. I was telling these guys before the show, I'm having an old fashioned, by the way. I was telling the guys before the show, I made sure I had everything I need. I had my bitters, I had my bourbon, I had my cherry, my orange, I had everything ready to go. And then I went to make it tonight, and we have no sugar in the house. Not just no sugar cubes, no sugar whatsoever. So 8:00 at night, I'm banging on my neighbor's door, who I forgot was diabetic, to ask her for some sugar, a cup of sugar. So Paula, cheers to you for letting me have my old fashioned tonight, and through the door when the creepy guy was pounding on your door, drastically looking for some alcohol.
Just like, why don't you pour some lemon juice on my paper cuts while you're here?
So cheers, everybody. Thank you for joining the show, Angus. Now, we like to do a little thing here before we get started to just kind of get the juices flowing. It's a little thing we like to call wine, beer, or pop culture reference. So this is where I'm going to give the panel a term, and they're going to try to tell me if it's a wine term, a beer term, or some kind of pop culture reference. The term this week is Coven. So is Coven, I don't know. I might not be pronouncing it right. Is a wine term, a beer term, or a pop culture reference? Let's start with Ruyak.
Well, gee whiz. If I overthink this, I don't know. A coven is a group of witches.
Okay.
So if they're all sitting around drinking liquore strega from Italy, maybe it's a spirit reference. But I'm going to say it's something pop culture. Being a coven is a group of witches, so maybe it's got something to do with the last season of Game of Thrones or something.
All right. Jeff Solomon.
And just to be clear, it's Coven.
That's correct.
Yeah, I have to say it's a pop culture reference. I was actually at a very popular coven of witches. We were so big that the cost of Eye of Newt skyrocketed.
All right. Angus, any idea what Coven may be?
Well, I have to say, the first ever bar job I ever had 30 years ago was in a nightclub called The Coven. So I'd like to think that it's a pop culture reference or the birthplace of legendary bartenders. But in order to be different for this one, I'm going to go with it being a beer term. It doesn't sound quite whiny enough on my hand.
No, go with what you said first. Very good. Now this is a weird one. Because Jeff and John got it right, but Angus got it right for the right reason, but gave me the wrong answer. So Coven is, in fact, a pop culture reference, and it is, in fact, a place where fantastic bartenders are birthed, because it was where our guest started his career in September of 1988 as a bartender. Did I get the year right?
You did indeed, unfortunately. Yes, it shows my age somewhat, but still.
Wow. So you were like doing like drinks with flair while Greg Louganis was cracking his head on a diving board in Seoul, South Korea.
Yeah, this was a rather dodgy nightclub in Oxford, so there wasn't a lot of flair going on there on the whole. A lot of ridiculously bad drinking.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, before we get into the hard drinking, let's take a moment to get a word from our sponsor.
Oh, that's me. Last time I talked with y'all about our sponsor, Wine's Till Sold Out. I mentioned that it's a great way to learn about wine. This week, I want to help you up your learning to the next level. The next time you visit WTSO.com/WLD, be sure to click the weekly tasting tab. There, you're going to find hand-selected lots of wines from their wine experts who know way more about wine than us knuckleheads, each highlighting a particular wine style or region. This week, I see that our friend Elizabeth Schneider has curated a taste of wines of Tuscany for you. You get 4 bottles of some great wines for $69.99 with free shipping. And if that's not enough, you'll get access to a video of Elizabeth tasting her way through these wines so you can learn while you taste. Each week, there are multiple lots from a variety of wines and experts, so the learning never stops. So check out the weekly tastings today at WTSO.com/WLD and use the promo code WLD 2019 at checkout for even more savings. Back to the show.
Awesome. Great job, Jeff. All right, Angus.
I did do a great job, by the way, and I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt the interview, but fantastic job by me.
Did I start a precedence last year that we did always compliment ourselves? So Angus Winchester, a man of the bar/serving industry for 30 years now. Your latest gig here is with the Bar Convent. This started in Germany, and now you're kind of the director of education for the Brooklyn-based Go With This. Is that correct?
It is. I'm actually the education director for Berlin, Brooklyn, and coming this year, Sao Paulo in Brazil.
Ooh.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Excellent. So before we get into directly what you do for it, what is the Bar Convent and what can industry people expect when they attend it?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the industry thing. It's a trade show, so it's an industry focused event. So some of your listeners may be saying, why are you talking about something I can't go to? But it really helps set the agenda for what bartenders and servers, managers and owners are interested in and focused on. So hopefully, even if you are a civilian, as I call them, you will be able to benefit from this in terms of a slightly more delicious way than sitting in there. But it started in Berlin in 2007 and has become basically the de facto European bar show. 15,000 people over 3 days come along, learn, sample new products, network the hell out of themselves. And 2 years ago, well, this is the second year, they decided to set up another one in Brooklyn, Brooklyn being similarly funky to Berlin. So this is a place where bartenders can come along, try new products, all within the craft environment, though the big guys are represented there. They get to catch up with their friends, and also, as what I do, is help curate education about, topics and trends they should be aware of, as well as I say, helping set an agenda for new trends and ideas that people can go away and start practicing and playing with.
And it's fantastic from what I was looking at. The last time I think I saw there was over 60 seminars set up over there. And this is June 11th and 12th in Brooklyn, correct?
Yeah, so it's June 11th and 12th. There are 6 education areas, all free to enter. There's no tickets that you need to buy. It's first come, first served to a certain extent. But there's a main stage where we, the organizers, fly people in from around the country and around the world. So there's no sponsors, no brand messaging going on there. There are 2 also what we call demo bars. These are where the exhibitors at the show can talk about what they're proud about, what they're focusing on at the moment. But again, they realize that this is more than just cheap brand messaging, shall we say. There are 2 taste forums where people can come along and not drink, but learn, but at the same time sampling products. And this year, I'm very happy because we've actually partnered with the Wine and Spirits Education Trust to give them an entire area so they can demonstrate that they're really the only globally certified training organization for wines and spirits. And they're doing more with spirits, definitely. So we gave them an area. I take over an area where we're doing slightly quirkier masterclasses on some of the more esoteric categories. And finally, we realized that marketeers and distributors who are there need some education as well. So we've got like a business stage where people can talk about or listen to talks about, for example, how CBD in the cannabis industry is affecting alcohol, or what it's like to be a disruptive brand in this industry. So 65 education sessions, none longer than 45 minutes, so you won't get a numb bum or at the same time fall asleep. But hopefully you can learn something that's interesting, useful, practical, relevant, and interesting.
Yeah, and you had a lot of very interesting seminars set up. I was really interested in a lot of the stuff. And like you said, there's a lot of very forefront kind of thought going on into what you're presenting. What are some of the events that you're most looking forward to if you're able to attend any of the seminars?
Well, I love, somebody described it when they looked at the schedule and said it's a great mix of bartender geekiness and important social issues. Because of course,
put it, yes.
Yeah, I mean, bars are obviously the cradle of, social experience as well. So, we've got some, should we say, some businessy ones, people talking about, beating the odds of bar ownership, which, everyone wants to be a bar owner until they try it. And then they're like, why the hell did I choose to do this? We've got more specific terms of talks about things like élevage, the science and art of aging spirits. Some fun ones, things about, pop-up bars, have they gone too far? Should they pop off? Also, I like some of the things about some of the more social issues about helping bartenders and attendees rethink their relationship with alcohol. Because, I think bartender wellness and the wellness of the people serving you is important. As someone who flies all the time, I always like the idea that, you should always put your own oxygen mask on before you help others. So providing that sort of aspect, looking at the idea of diversity and activism within the bar environment and inclusivity. Lovely talk about, how you should build a longer table and be more inclusive in your hiring processes. And that's as well as discussing, Jamaican rums and the art of hospitality. And I mean, really, doesn't matter if you're geeky and you want to know about the resurgence of Californian brandy, for example, or you really want to get a sense of, helping, for example, building a strong sexual assault prevention program within your community. So there should be something for everybody. And I have to say, some of the speakers are incredible, from world experts like Dave Wondrich, the historical oracle, to lesser known people like a woman called Martha Hoover, who runs and has done for about as long as I've been bartending, a series of places in Indiana that really tick all the bases of sustainability and responsible sourcing and high levels of engagement and really looking after the people that look after you to a certain extent in a way that everyone's fixated on now, but she's been doing it for 30 years and is going to explain not just the why, but the how.
That's awesome. John.
Well, I guess that's interesting when you mention her, how much, trust customers place in the person that's serving their drink, and not just from a taste standpoint, but watching out for that person's well-being. It's you're placing in some cases you're placing your sobriety in the hands of somebody else and letting it responsibly go slightly off center, as it were. How have you seen that change in the 30 years you've been doing this? Was it the wild and wacky 80s? I remember going to bars in college and getting 2-for-1 price vodka Collinses and just, everybody walked home from there. But, it was a different world back then. So just, your thoughts on the evolution of the bartender as a social conscience, I guess.
I think it's two ways. Firstly, 30 years ago, nobody got into bartending thinking it was a responsible and respectable career. It was the land of the uncertain, the land of the socially broken, or the psychopathic on the whole. I got into it for sex, drugs, and rock and roll, if the truth be known, as many people did. But I realized that it was a really easy job to do badly, and it was a really difficult job to do well. I also realized that I thought initially being in the service industry meant that you were a servant. Yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir, customer's always right. Later on, I thought it was because I was serving drinks or food. But then I started to realize, as many people did, that I was being of service to people. My job is not to get you drunker or fatter. My job is to make you feel better. And bartenders are realizing that the art of service is not what you do to people, it's how you make them feel about themselves when they're in your company. So the idea of making people feel comfortable, welcome, important, and understood is far more necessarily important than super flashy Instagrammable cocktails. So, of course, we have to do those as well. So, I mean, there's that aspect from the social bit, but there's also the increased professionalism with our industry that, you know, I've been bartending, nobody cared about the quality of the cocktails I made, things to start off with. But increasingly, we see that a bartender has to have the skills of a sommelier in terms of understanding flavors, understanding production processes, subtle nuances, etc. But unlike a sommelier, we don't just open the bottle and pour it into a glass. No disrespect to sommeliers, but we suddenly turn into chefs, working with flavors and techniques and portion control and dilution rates, and it's become very technical. But unlike a chef, we don't hide in the kitchen, no disrespect to chefs. We're out front and center, serving people, making them feel good, and as you say, showing care for them, because these people are in your care. And so the idea of somebody walks into the bar drunk, you may say, I'm sorry, sir, I can't serve you. But we don't just then push you back out to play in the road. We care about how you're going to get home and, you know, looking after people like that. So I still maintain that this is a very easy job to do badly. You can step behind a bar with no training, no skill, no knowledge, and call yourself a bartender. But it is incredibly difficult to do it well because of the knowledge, the techniques, and also, of course, the art of hospitality, which is something that we're running a few sessions on it because some people think it is all about the drink now. And it's not. It's all about the person who's drinking the drink and how you make them feel.
Yeah. So because nearly around the time you were starting to bartend, I did a stint as a bartender, and kind of similar to what John was saying. At the time, it was, I think they spent more time training me on how to use the POS than they did how to mix a drink. You know, there's like, well, there's a book under the table if you don't know what it is. And let's be honest, at the time, 99% of the drinks I poured were either beer or an alcohol and a fuzzy mixer. You know, and so you were alluding to how the bartender today has to have all this different knowledge and all this different skill. And I'm curious, over those 30 years, has that been, what has driven that? Has that been the bartenders became more serious about their craft and educated the customers, or the customers became more educated and demanded more from their bartenders?
Well, I work around the world, and you go to somewhere like the Philippines and they're like, how can we develop a cocktail culture? And this is bartenders asking this, but I always say, it doesn't matter how good you are, it only matters how interested your guests are. So you have that aspect that, you know, this isn't a one-way transaction. It has to be a two-way transaction. I think several things. I think the increase in media, I remember trying to buy a bartending book 25 years ago, and it was maybe 2 or 3 books at the end of a section on wine. Now you go into a bookstore and, you know, wine has its own section. The cookery section is huge, of course. But there are more and more books on bartending, cocktails, mezcal, sherry. And so you have this increased growth of information like that. I mean, my entire career as an educator was really based around work I did for brands, because the idea is that, you know, Johnny Walker create a wonderful product, years of experience going into creating it, crafting it, marketing it, packaging it, and then they just dump it on the doorstep of a bunch of people who really just want to rip the necks off bottles and try and get laid. So they've realized that they really had to become educators. And so, you know, I was a global brand ambassador for Tanqueray for 7 years, traveling around the world, training people on behalf of Tanqueray, not just about Tanqueray, but about bartending and about cocktail techniques and things. And I think bartenders like to show off this knowledge. And there's a certain type of person that does get engaged by the interesting flavors, the history of the spirits. You know, I think less and less people, though it's still a large amount of people, less and less people are drinking just to get drunk. Robert Hess, who's a wonderful educator within the industry, who worked for Microsoft and so did it all electronically on websites and notice boards, which were useful. He used to say, drinking just to get drunk is rather like having sex just to get pregnant. That, you know, it might happen, but it's not always the end result. And that drinking can be a pleasurable activity, and it gets even better when, you know, you understand the story behind a drink or the nuances behind a spirit and things. And that to a certain extent, spirits drove this movement because the spirit companies make more money, had more budgets, had more restrictions upon advertising, and that the bartender is the ultimate salesperson, the last person in the line who can make you love a brand or hate a brand. And a good one can totally change the way you view tequila, for example, from a liquid you throw down your neck on a Saturday night and throw up on a Sunday morning into something that can be enjoyed, savored, drunk in interesting ways, looking at the authenticity of drinks like the Paloma and Sangrita and the Charro Negro, rather than the tequila, salt and lime and the margarita.
Awesome. John, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I wanted to get that follow-up question.
Well, I think, Angus, you already kind of fleshed this out, this experiential drinking, this bespoke movement, I guess is what they're calling it, is, just the evolution of the dual evolution of educated consumers and highly proficient mixologists. I guess one of the other things that's a little bit more of a challenge here in the United States, being that each state regulates liquor differently. How are you seeing, the rise of craft distilling with all these craft distillers and trying to fight through, all these regulations and, people thinking they are going to get something in New York when it's not available because it's made in Ohio, that kind of thing. Are you seeing like these educational things or information being shared between service professionals in different areas of the country to help them deal with that? Or how do you see that progressing with the rise of craft distilling?
No, I mean, the rise of craft is obviously a huge movement, not just in the US, but around the world as well. The US is complicated. Is it one country or 50 different countries? But there are more and more shows and educational events around the world, from Rochester, New York, to my show VCB, Chicago, Portland, San Francisco, Austin, San Antonio. There's a lot of these sort of gatherings where bartenders get together, and there are so many craft distilleries now that you may not be able to get this slightly recherche small brand, but there is something similar to it. And of course, I mean, local is such a huge driver, I think, now. I mean, I read a statistic the other day that it's 65% of people between the ages of 18 to 34 will put local as more important than taste as a preference for buying. The idea that you don't care if it doesn't taste as good as something, the fact that it's made just down the road is sort of more important to people.
Wow.
But the craft movement is, and craft bartending, craft beer, craft wine, craft spirits, it is happening all the way across the US. And there are differences between East Coast bartending, West Coast bartending. Every state thinks their bartenders, every city thinks their bartenders are better than the others. But it is a consistent movement across the country, even if the exact range of products may not be as wide sweeping.
Cool.
You know what I love about having you on the show, Angus, is that when I heard that we were going to have you on for Bar Convent Brooklyn, and as I was thinking about it, I'm like, gosh, I don't know if this is really going to work. And then the more and more I'm thinking about it, the more and more I'm reading up on this show, I'm thinking that, and we actually do have a lot of industry folks that listen to our show. And I hope that especially those of you on the East Coast have already bought your early bird tickets to go to this. But even from a consumer standpoint, I think the reason why we should all care about things like Bar Convent is because we are the end result of what happens when people aren't doing things the right way, when people aren't properly trained, when people aren't thinking about things like sexual harassment in bars, which is huge, right? And so I'm glad that things like this exist, and I feel like I want to go up to certain bars that shall not be named in my local area and hand them a flyer and say, will you please, just whoever the owner is, tell them to go and tell them to bring everybody on staff, because you're going to have a great time. But I think at the end of the day, your customers will be thankful that you went. And I guess what I was hoping, just from kind of moseying around here is I was wondering, with as many places as you've been in the world, with as many bars as you've been in, what's the most common thing that you see people doing wrong at bars? Like what is the thing that people need to fix?
In terms of from a customer point of view,
from a management point of view, what should they be focusing on to make things better?
Well, I mean, I do a lot of work now for managers and owners because they're not getting a lot of education that brands are focusing on bartenders because they are the ultimate end result salesperson, etc. And I think I stopped training bartenders because I thought we're teaching them loads of stuff that they don't really need to know and that guests don't really care about. And they've become increasingly geeky, and that we do need to go back to the art of conversation. Some of the best bartenders I know will read 2 newspapers, 3 newspapers a day so that they can talk to their guests about whatever their guest is interested in, because not everyone goes to bars to worship at the temple of the mixologist and, kiss the mixologist ring and be dazzled by their drinks. That some people come in just to have a good time. And we're seeing, for example, the increase in non-alcoholic spirits. That may sound a little bit weird, but the idea of what to drink when you're not drinking, the idea of wanting the experience of hanging out in a bar, but not necessarily wanting the alcohol. And, if I was going to talk about customers and consumers, it's all about the idea that people complaining the drink's not strong enough, which is like, okay, I mean, I could serve you a stronger drink, but it's like serving you more food on your plate. It's not actually good for your health. It's not good for your enjoyment. It's not a better drink because it's stronger. But it's a common problem. And so from a bartender, server, manager point of view, care more about your guests than you do about the drink, and that they will reflect back. I mean, I used to say as a bartender, I would always look out to check that my guests were happy. And the amount of times, solo ladies were being perhaps bothered by other drunk patrons. And, I would always come up and basically pretend to be the lady's brother, something like that. Hey, have you seen Mum recently? And they would sort of say, thanks, this creep was bothering me. But that was tribal knowledge. I knew that through experience. And one of the things that these shows have is basically taking that tribal knowledge and telling people, here are 3 great solutions for handling a girl being bothered by a bunch of drunk guys in a bar, whether it's calling a taxi for Andrea or asking them to order a certain drink if they feel uncomfortable. So I love the idea of sharing knowledge, rising the skill level of everyone involved, which of course, it's not for our own benefit, it is for our guests' benefit. And we serve beer, wine, spirits, cocktails, but we serve people. That's the consistent thing. So turning it back and remembering the end consumer and why they're there is, I think, important, and what some bar owners and especially bartenders seem to forget sometimes.
Yeah, I like one of the things I saw that you said is that you're not in the cocktail business, you're in the experience business. And I like that quote. Guys, any last questions for Angus before we move on? Jeff, I'll go to you.
Working with Tanqueray, are you a martini man?
I am, of course, a martini man. I think it was Hemingway who said that the ordering and drinking of martini is one of the 3 great manly arts. Luckily, it's not true that I know a lot of women who drink martinis, but I am very much a martini aficionado.
So can you squash the debate right here? Gin martini, shouldn't it be stirred?
When it comes down to it, if you order a martini, a good bartender should ask you 4 questions. And if they don't, be slightly wary. The first question is the ingredients question. So gin or vodka now, unfortunately, but think about gin brands of vermouth, maybe even a dash of bitters. Mm-hmm. The second question is the proportion question. How dry do you want your martini? And you ask a guest and they'll say very, not understanding what it means, but thinking that very something is better than whatever the alternative is. The third question... The last question is always Charles Dickens, which is olive or twist, which martini drinkers tend to like that sort of pun. But the third question is always, and I used to say it in my best James Bond accent, shaken or stirred. Don't do it anymore because Robert De Niro laughed at me one time when I did it. So no more Sean Connery accent. But it has to be said, one of the things that we found now is bartenders have said, okay, when we shake a cocktail, when we stir a cocktail, what processes are happening? You know, chilling, mixing, aeration, dilution. And they've actually started to separate those various processes. So I was hanging out with a Mexican bartender in Slovakia who bartends in Zurich. It shows what an international industry we have. He drinks his martinis reposado style, or rested, where he just literally rests the gin and vermouth on ice. No shaking, no stirring, no agitation at all. You would then have throwing, which is another technique where you're basically aerating the drink without diluting it so much, and that was developed in Cuba and then popularized in a bar in Barcelona. Then, of course, you have stirring and shaking. It is entirely down to you. You can shake a gin martini. Of course you can. Gin doesn't bruise if you shake it, because you shake it in lots of other cocktails. But I always like the idea that the don't shake a gin martini because you bruise the gin happened with two gentlemen walking into a bar, and one asked for a mint julep, but don't bruise the mint. And the other one, wanting to be equally pedantic, said he would have a martini, but don't bruise the gin. So there are 4 questions a good bartender should ask, 4 questions that you should think when you're discovering your perfect martini. But as somebody once said, early plane crash and shipwreck rescue kits used to just be a bottle of vermouth, a bottle of gin, and a cocktail shaker, and you'd start making a martini. Within 5 minutes, somebody would appear on the horizon saying, "That's not how you make a martini," and you'd be rescued.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I'm sorry, real quick follow-up. In all your world travels, have you ever been through San Jose, California?
I have been through San Jose several times, and there used to be a really good bar at the airport in San Jose, which, as somebody who lives most of their lives in airports, having a good bar in an airport, the best one is probably One Flew South in Atlanta, and it's worth going through for that. But San Jose used to have a really good little bar, and it's a great little scene down there. I mean, yeah, great craft beer scene, but there's some great bars down there as well. And I've got some friends who run some nice spots down there. Haberdasher, I think was what it used to be called. Definitely worth visiting.
So I was wondering, in your little ventures to San Jose, have you ever been to the Winchester Mystery House? And if so, did they let you in for free?
I've driven past it several times. I've never managed to get in there, but a lot of Americans always say, Angus Winchester, what a cool name. Is it made up? No, nobody's going to make up the name Angus, I can tell you now. People regularly leaving the G out accidentally, which is always embarrassing. But as I say, it's there's a couple of Winchesters around the place, and I've never invented any cocktails worth a damn, but I've got 7 drinks named after me. So hopefully my legacy will continue on. But a lot of people say, have you ever been to the Winchester House? I'm like, no, but you should come to my Winchester House sometime.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Where can we find these 7 drinks named after you?
A variety of bars around the world. Now, probably the best one and the bar I'd recommend people visit, go to the Polynesian in New York City in Times Square. They have a drink there called a double-barreled Winchester, but it actually started off as just the Winchester, which is a gin-based zombie. So, you know, the zombie uses 3 different rums. A wonderful bartender called Brian Miller decided to create one using 3 different gins. And it is, I think, a modern classic. And that's the one I would try and track down. There are a few others that perhaps a little bit ropier. So let's stick with the Winchester.
So that's like a tiki style drink, like in a big like fish bowl.
It comes in a tall tiki mug, but yeah, it is a tiki drink, and it shows. I mean, tiki is beyond rum. Started off with rum, and that's fine. But there are some great other tiki drinks. But I was honored, as somebody pointed out, that this drink is tall, cool, and filled with lots of gin, and as that's how I spend most of my life, it was appropriate that it was named after me.
That's wonderful.
John, any final? Do you have a final question?
Well, no. Yeah, kind of. I mean, I did see.
Way to be clear in your answer.
Well, I was okay. So I saw it at the Brooklyn show that there's a liquor from Germany called Baron Jaeger.
Yep.
Which is distilled from honey, I guess. And they guess they used to use it to bait bears in Germany way back in the day, which the name comes from. So I thought sortilege, which was like made from maple syrup in Canada, they use that to hunt hockey pucks. But I wasn't sure if you're aware of any liquors that are distilled from smoked whale testicles.
No, I mean, obviously there's a lot of unicorn tears being used in dilution nowadays, which is an important one. But I mean, it is this thing that we're discovering whole new categories of spirits, away from just gin, vodka, tequila, rum. I mean, mezcal and agave spirits have changed out of all recognition from back in my day, where there is all about the worm in the bottom of the bottle. Things like Sotol, Raicea, Bacanora, they're all really interesting, but we're also rediscovering things like pomace spirits. Grappa would be the obvious example. The leftover wine grape skins are being used to distill, normally for the farmers that grew it. So it was a small and artisanal product, but wherever you make wine, there is a spirit residue afterwards. So Marc from France, Cha-Cha from Georgia, Sipuru from Greece, and bartenders, as they become more knowledgeable, guests as they become more knowledgeable, we are experimenting more, trying new weird things. Though there is a spirit that I think is made from fermented beaver urine. So maybe not beer testicles, but there is definitely some weirdness. And I have unfortunately drunk a lot of things where it's been infused with tiger penis and snake and things like that. And I can tell you now, they all do taste as unpleasant as you would think they do. Well, so whether they put lead in your pencil, as they claim, I'm not entirely sure.
Well, it was kind of a roundabout way to is there something that you're surprised that, I mean, it seems like in the whole of human history, people have tried to like make an intoxicant, an alcoholic beverage out of just about everything. Is there something that you're surprised that somebody hasn't made an alcoholic drink out of?
To be honest, no, because I mean, they've tried a lot. I mean, a lot of people talk, of course, that alcohol came from alchemy, that, people trying to discover the secrets of eternal youth and found the water of life, aqua vitae, whiskaby, etc. So, if you're trying to turn lead into gold and you end up with alcohol, then people, I think, have tried most things. I've tried most things as well, but I am rarely surprised now by what people will try to be a point of difference, if nothing else.
I can't believe John felt the need to ask that question after you just dropped tiger penis on him.
So Angus, let's say that you're trying to, what is a drink that you will order from a bartender to test their chops, if you will?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, there is become a bit of a movement of trying to stump the bartender.
And I guess I don't mean like stump the bartender. Like, yeah, what's the drink that like John will talk about being able to brew an amber beer shows that you're a good bartender. So what is a drink that you can order for a bartender that if they do it right, it's a sign that they are a good bartender, I guess is more what I was going for.
I mean, I think some people would say just order your favorite cocktail and see how it works. But the basic thing would be a daiquiri, because a daiquiri is just rum, lime, and sugar. But it's a case of, it shows the quality of ingredients that a bar is using. It also, to be able to balance it correctly. If a bartender, when I order a daiquiri, says, sure, peach or strawberry, I know that I should probably be backing away from it, etc. Because the frozen daiquiri can be made well, but if that's what you think a daiquiri is, then I think I'm going to go drink somewhere else, or obviously drink a beer instead. But I think a lot of decent bartenders would say, yeah, a daiquiri is a great test of a bartender's skill, in the way that an omelet is a great test of a chef's skill, or as you say, an amber or a decent pilsner is for a brewer's one. So I'm going to go with the daiquiri.
Excellent. That wasn't where I expected where you go, but that's awesome. Okay, so again, this is the Bar Convent Brooklyn, happening June 11th and 12th obviously in Brooklyn. Interesting folks can check it out at barconventbrooklyn.com to get their tickets. Anything else that people need to know about the upcoming BCB? Not
too much. I would tell people if they're going to buy tickets, buy them soon. Because they're $40, $48 before the 3rd of May, $65 before the show, $80 on the day. But I'd always say, although it's a great networking experience, get people to treat it like work. Come along and take advantage of the education, visit all the stands, don't necessarily sample all of the drinks. And as I say, I mean, it's you never learn less. Even if you're a great bartender, a great spirits expert, you won't come away knowing less than you did beforehand. So, I often talk that bartenders should remember that this is a profession, not necessarily a lifestyle, and that any profession requires extensive training, education, and testing. And this is a great opportunity for people to come along and learn more.
And obviously a huge networking component to it as well, as any conference is.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we all know, networking is only one vowel away from not working. So it's a good thing.
Awesome, Angus. All right. So thank you so much for joining us. We're going to move on with the rest of the show and get into the hard-hitting news that is Booze News, where we discuss interesting, noteworthy, or sometimes some pretty stupid things. This week, the Brewers Association came out with their latest craft beer production numbers by state here in the U.S. A bit of a change up in the top 5. So we've talked about this multiple times. It's interesting and surprising. But I'm just going to run through the top 5 here. Number 1, Pennsylvania, and this is craft beer by volume, right, John?
Correct.
Yeah. Pennsylvania is number 1. California, not surprising, number 2. Colorado coming in at number 3. Ohio jumps it back into the top 5 after a year out, and Florida rounds out the top 5. Then we go on to New York, North Carolina, Texas, Oregon, and number 10, God bless them, Wisconsin. So I always find this interesting. John, as a brewer, is the volume the important indicator? That's what they always kind of go by. But is that the important indicator you should be looking at for a state when you're talking about craft beer and what they're doing in that state?
I don't think so, because we all know that it's Yuengling that's propping up Pennsylvania's numbers. I think what you really ought to be looking for is openings and closings. So, obviously some businesses fail, and that's too bad for those folks. It could be for any number of reasons, location, quality of product, whatever it might be. But as long as openings are far outweighing closings, I think that's the thing. And is there year-over-year growth in actual volume of people consuming craft beer? So, okay, so there's new places opening. Are they just dividing up the pie, or are they making the pie bigger? You don't want to see a zero-sum game. You want to see increased market share for the craft beer industry. That's what I would say.
Okay. Any surprises on this list to you?
I am surprised, like, knowing that Yuengling propped up Pennsylvania. I'm surprised that Massachusetts didn't make it behind the freight train that is Sam Adams.
Well, Massachusetts is a relatively small state population-wise. I mean, there's only about 6 million people in Massachusetts.
But
it's a small
it's not
state.
Based on how many people are drinking it within that state, I could walk into any bar anywhere and order a Sam.
True enough, but places like Heady Topper, those type of places, are not Heady Topper. That's Vermont, but Treehouse, those kinds of places, they're not distributing in 50 states. I don't see any of that stuff here.
Hey, Mexico, look, man! I'm just saying I was surprised. You don't have to.
I'm just going to shoot you down and say, "What's your problem?"
Can you acknowledge my feelings so we can move on?
Well,
I'm not acknowledging that at all.
That's the problem with your generation. You'll never understand me.
Is Sam Adams 100% out of Massachusetts, or are they multi-state brewed now?
They used to contract at Iron City in Pittsburgh for the longest time.
Shit. That's what it was.
Angus, how does the craft beer how does the craft beer served in a bar affect the spirit side of it? Like if it's,
I don't.
go ahead.
I mean, I think I don't think it negatively affects it at all. I mean, you can't run a decent cocktail bar without having at least 1 or 2 decent beers, and you can't open a decent bar without having 10 or 12 different beers.
Yeah.
I think, the draft aspect versus the bottled canned aspect. I think draft beer tends to send a little bit more of a pubby message, whereas beer, in a bottle, can, trendy design, things like that, and also ticks with the sort of local boxes. But I mean, bartenders love beer. I mean, you ask them what their end of work drink is, their shift drink, and it's going to be a beer.
Yeah.
It's just they don't do as much education for the on premise in terms of, it's a cocktail bar. There's no point training there. Similar to the wine companies as well. So, as I say, I don't think they're in any way mutually exclusive. I think maybe the local aspect plays heavier. That they want to serve something local, and it's easier to do that with beer than it is with spirits a lot of the time. But the craft spirits industry looks at the beer industry and says, at least you guys have it down in terms of proper definitions for craft. There's still no real definition about what a craft spirit is. Is it volume? Is it ownership? Is it whether the founder is still physically involved in the business and things like that? So, I wish the spirits industry had more of the sense of regulation that the craft beer industry has, especially in the US, because it's craft and spirits is basically it's a consumer hot button, like organic, local, small batch, handcrafted. It sort of means nothing, but gets consumers excited about it. Whereas it does seem to mean more in the world of beer.
So do you think, I mean, not to go back into your interview, but do you feel like it sounds like you think the craft distillery industry needs a little bit more definition in order to maybe meet its potential that the craft beer industry has?
Without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, one of the problems is you go into a decent liquor store and look at these small craft distillery bottles on on the shelves, and they're going to cost you 3 or 4 times what, should we say, the large industry versions of. And we're trained to think if something is $70 a bottle, that it must be really good. And it's not. It's because of the economics of small distilling,
Right.
and that you don't have the economies of scale. And so I think there's a lot of people are buying a small, cool, crazy craft whiskey, getting it home and being massively disappointed because enthusiasm doesn't equate to skill. And that potentially puts them off choosing other small, lesser known brands. Whereas, as I said, there's a little bit more regulation. It sounds odd, bartenders wanting more rules, but just to make it clearer to people about, who really does control this product and, why it's more expensive.
Well, there's still plenty of places in the craft beer industry that are making less than stellar beer. And, some of those places are new and they're still trying to work their way into, dialing in their recipe. So, with distilling, I'm not exactly sure how that works. I don't understand it at all. I mean, I have a hard enough time keeping up with all the stuff in brewing, let alone winemaking or distilling. So, it seems like it's a young industry. So, maybe those people that are charging $70 for a bottle for something that's less than stellar will get their act together before it affects them or the industry as a whole.
I certainly hope so. I mean, I want to see more local, interesting, quirky products. But as a professional bartender, somebody who sells drinks for a living, I hate to see that bartender's remorse, purchase buyer's remorse when they try something a little bit quirky and, their $17 cocktail is honestly garbage. We tried to do our best for it, but at the same time, it really doesn't do what it says on the bottle.
And I don't mean to keep going with the interview, but what have you been pleasantly surprised by in the craft distilling industry? What's been a really nice, puts a smile on your face? Wow, I'm glad these guys did that.
Well, I mean, a lot of stuff, but really, I mean, what I'm really liking is some of the interesting things going on in American whiskey. And when I say American whiskey, I mean whiskey made in America. I mean, the things that like Rieger and Co. are doing to bring back credible blended American whiskey is great. And also the American single malts. People like Westwood, the guys up in House Spirits and things like that, are doing some really fantastic liquids, which is great. So that's what I'm most interested in. I think people jumping on the gin bandwagon is getting a little bit tiresome, and people are talking about, have we reached peak gin now? But there are some incredible distillers out there. Clear Creek up in Portland, St. George, obviously, just pushing boundaries, trying some weird stuff and being experimental. But some of them, not all of them, are making gorgeous liquids that will change people's perception of an American single malt. God, surely the best stuff comes from Scotland, but no, Ireland's getting back into the game, but the Americans are coming.
Here we go. I like the Tanqueray guy saying, telling the gin guys to stop producing gin. I'm totally joking. I'm totally kidding.
I know, but it's one of these things. Gin.
And by the way, I totally agree with you what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, as I say, a lot of people don't like gin because they don't like juniper, but people are now making gins that don't taste of juniper. And you're like, okay, well, if you don't like juniper, don't drink gin. I mean, there's so much other stuff you can drink, but over-flavored drinks, rather like over-hopping IPAs and things like that. You're like, well, hey, what can we do? Throw in more hops. Isn't necessarily conducive to successful behavior. So I have to say you should do Boilermakers with a good juniper-forward gin and a good hoppy IPA. It is a combination made in heaven.
Wait, what?
Do a Boilermaker, but whether you choose to drop the shot into the beer or sip from one and sip from the other, but a good London dry gin, Beefeater Tanqueray, juniper forward, sipped with a good hoppy IPA. It's a wonderful combination.
Dude.
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Challenge accepted.
Everybody listening, you have just received your homework assignment for this week. A Boilermaker with an IPA and a juniper forward gin. I cannot wait to try this. Getting back to the article, Jeff Solomon. Congratulations. California remains #1 in number of craft breweries. 841 breweries in your state.
Yeah, we're the best. Thought you knew. Whoop, there it is.
Colorado comes in at #2 for number of craft breweries.
Yeah.
This is the gap. 396.
Well, there's 5 million people in Colorado. There's 28 million people in California.
Right.
But no, like, come on, dude. Like, the thing is, we have mass appeal in California. Like, that's what it is. Here's what you need to do. Colorado, if you're steaming about this, how about you just do better? Do better.
Okay.
Wow.
Hold on a second, Jeff Solomon.
Just like your shitty hockey teams.
Shut the fuck up, Jeff Solomon. Let me just say, 2.9 breweries per capita for California comes in at 28th. Colorado, 9.2 breweries per capita comes in at 4th. So suck it.
Sorry, everybody wants to live where the weather's good. My apologies.
All right.
Sorry, our economy's booming. Everybody wants a chunk.
All right, excellent. All right, well, let's move on from that. Let's get into our favorite news segment that'll probably be over by next week, but it is. The We Like Drinking, we'll call it Discount Corner again. So if you listened to our episode a couple weeks ago with Nick Barasone from High Camp Flasks, and this is a great Father's Day gift, the High Camp Flask. Where is mine? I don't have it handy. But this is the 750 milliliter or 375 milliliter flask that comes with a tumbler magnetically sealed to the stainless steel vessel 2 in the 750 milliliter. What do you guys think of it? I mean,
it's a pro piece of equipment. Holy
and it could kill a bear if you need it.
Yeah, you fill it with some Lagavulin or some Royal Lochnagar. You just knock it upside of that bear's head, just knock it straight out.
So, so a couple things on this. To me, this is a great Father's Day gift, and through Father's Day, they are running a 15% off what you purchase by using coupon code We Like Drinking. And remember, if you send Nick Barasone or High Camp Flasks a recipe from a restaurant for a mixed drink, they will make that drink in their vessel and photo it for Instagram, them drinking it. So, Jeff, have you gotten the chance to use it yet?
I have not, but I have fought off crime with it several times. I walk out of the store, I walk out of my house, like the mean streets of my Gilroy suburb. Like I'm just, hey, break it up, guys. I just throw the flask at them. It's awesome. No, it's a great product. It's cool.
So good. Check it out. High Camp Flask. I've heard from a couple of listeners looking for the coupon code that they're getting it for a Father's Day gift. And I think that's a spot on thing to do. So highcampflask.com. We Like Drinking is the code to get 15% off. If that's not enough, Christy Norman, who has been on the show a couple times, released her online wine class for beginners. She has given us a free copy of the course to give away. So take to Instagram, search up hashtag WLD contest. That'll take you to the post. You can get up to 3 entries, one for liking the post, one for commenting on the post, and one for following us on the Instagrams at We Like Drinking. I will say, if you already follow us and you comment, I will give you the 3rd entry. So before you go calling me out on something, Jeff, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say happy birthday, Christy Norman.
Happy birthday.
She's living her best
Happy
life.
Birthday.
So make sure you check those out if you are interested in. But it's probably Angus's favorite or maybe saddest part of the show, where we have to call
Last call.
Last call.
That is last call. Time to clean house and lock the doors. So you know what we do here, folks. It's time to break out your phones and get that last minute hookup with us. You can follow the We Like Drinking show on the Instagrams and the Twitters and the Facebooks. You can visit us on Twitter at We Like Drinking 1. That's the number 1 on Instagram and Facebook at We Like Drinking, or get to know our tavern private Facebook group by visiting welikedrinking.com/tavern. Angus, one last time, what's the best place for people to find you or BCB on the social medias?
Well, Angus Winchester on Instagram, Twitter, various social medias. I'm old enough that I want my email addresses as well. I mean, just anguswinchester@gmail.com. I always say to people, if you're traveling to another city, give me 2 weeks notice. I'll find you a friendly bartender in that city, because we love sharing things like that. But BCB Brooklyn, Bar Convent Brooklyn, ask Mr. Google. They will find you the best and easiest way to get in touch and keep in touch. And if you do come to the show, come up and see me and say that you heard me on We Like Drinking.
There you go. What's your preferred social media? Which one are you happier with, Instagram or Twitter? Which one do you like more?
I'm a wordy kind of character, so I like my Twitter. Okay. But I don't look good in pictures, as unfortunately you guys now know by staring at me for the last hour and a half. So apologies for that one.
Angus, though, seriously, you got to be on the show more often, because I need to have someone who's got about the same amount of hair as me, because these guys have way too much.
Yeah, well, let's say it's a stressful life that I've lived, etc. And I've seen some. I have some wrinkles, but because my eyes have seen many things, and my bones may be weary because I have done many, many things in my life, etc. Not all of them I can talk about here, but as I say, hair, who needs it?
That's for after the show. Jeff Solomon, if the people want to leave a review, what's the best way to do it?
It's difficult to find wigs that look almost identical that are just slightly longer every week. Make sure that you're already listening to us on iTunes. Just go ahead and scroll down and poke and give us a big fat 5-star review. Let us know how much you love our show, and let us know what we need to do better. Just like Colorado, we could always do better.
And you can always visit welikedrinking.com/pledge to find out more information about becoming a patron of the show, so you can help us out with continuing to grow this product. You can also find the show notes for this episode with all the links to the stories or mentions we had at welikedrinking.com/podcast. Or if you're on your phone right now, just keep doing something with your thumb until you see some stars and then hit 5. All right. So we've reached the time of the show where I get to say, okay, panel, let's take one last trip around this table and get some final thoughts before we shut off the lights. John Ruyak.
So I just want to ask the listeners I'm going to do a poll here. What should be my life's goal? To take down Amazon because they're killing local business, to just totally destroy AB InBev because we all know they just suck, or should we just try to take our fight against the 3-tier system to the United States Supreme Court? You guys be the judge. Tell me what I need to do with my life.
All right. Well, John wants to know what he's going to do when he grows up, and he's asking our listeners to do it. That's a positive life choice right there. Jeff Solomon.
I just came to this realization. Here we're talking to Angus Winchester. In our world, it is May 1st. In his world, it's already the 2nd. Can you tell me, is it going to rain tomorrow or not?
I'm not prepared to comment on that because raining would mean going outside the bar, and no bartender wants you to leave the bar. So you stay inside, fix yourself a decent drink, or stay there and talk to the bartender.
And Angus, before we get out of here, any final thoughts?
Obviously, I'd love people to come to BCB. You talked earlier about testing bartenders. If you really want to test how good a bartender is, ask them to tell you a joke.
Ooh.
Because the great bartender should be able to immediately come up with a great joke, rather than necessarily tell you the mash bills of all of the bourbons that they're standing in front of, etc. So you want to put the fear of God into a bartender, but tell the difference between a bartender and a mixologist. Ask them to tell you a joke. And of course, look out for the coctologist. The coctologist is someone who makes great drinks, but is a bit of a dick about it.
Awesome. And Angus, let me just say thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us. We really do appreciate it. We hope any of the industry folks that are listening to us will check out BCB and get to it in June. And yeah, thanks again for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And with that, we'll say thanks again for joining us at the We Like Drinking podcast.
We're not you'll never
drink alone.
Awesome.
Cool.